his disciples a parable. Can a blind person guide a blind person? Will not both fall into the pit? No disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like his teacher. Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's or sister's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own? How can you say to your brother or sister, let me remove that splinter in your eye, when you do not even notice the wooden beam in your own eye? You hypocrite! Remove the wooden beam from your eye first, then you'll see clearly to remove the splinter in your brother or sister's eye. A good tree does not bear rotten fruit, nor does a rotten tree bear good fruit, for every tree is known by its fruit. For people do not pick figs from thorn bushes, nor do they gather grapes from brambles. A good person out of the store of goodness in his heart produces good, but an evil person out of a store of evil produces evil. For from the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
What a difference a week makes. We live in a different world than we did a week ago. And if you're like me, you're probably horrified. You maybe feel a little helpless of what's been going on in Ukraine and with Russia invading. So I think it's important that we hear and talk about this and from a Christian point of view, and just trying to see what the scriptures, today's scriptures, say in light of this past week's events. So the first reading we hear from the book of Sirach. This was written by a man who was called Jesus ben Sirach. It was written about 160 years before Jesus was born. Okay? And in this little snippet that we heard today, there was one line that really stuck out for me. And that line was, in times of tribulation, the just are tested. In times of trial and tribulation, the just are tested. And just seeing what's going on and looking at the news, you've seen, the horrific things that have gone on in Ukraine. And how those people are so determined. They're so resolute. As their army is nothing compared to Russia's. And yet they're fighting. And they're determined to preserve their way of life. There are two scenes that particularly kind of caught my eye. One was, I was on one of those news channels, and the reporter was interviewing this mom. I'd say she was in her 30s or 40s, and she had a little nice 9 or 10-year-old blonde-haired kid right next to her, hold down. And they were in the train, in the subway, just trying to avoid being bombed. And the reporter says, you don't look scared at all. He says, I can't be scared. I have to show my children of what we're going through, and I have to be a good example to them. And she said, we are not going to leave. We are not going anywhere. We are going to defend our country. In times of tribulation, the just are tested. The other scene was a remarkable scene. It was in a city park of Kiev, and it was it had beautiful brick squares, and it was beautifully laid. And in the middle of that square, in the middle of town, and with bombs exploding in the background, as I heard it, there were 6 to 8 women forming a circle, kneeling down and praying. Maybe you saw that scene too. But what a powerful scene. Here they are, bombs going off, their city's being attacked, and what are they doing? They're on their knees. They're praying. Wow. The trials and tribulations of the just are tested. They're passing that test. In the second reading, our conclusion of Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, he's trying to tell them, to be steadfast, be firm in your faith, because being a Christian back then was really hard. It was very hard. Your life was in jeopardy sometimes for just believing in Jesus. And so he's telling them, be resolute, be steadfast, be firm, because in the end, you stay with Christ, you're going to win. And he even says, death, where's your victory? Death, where's your sting? We know through the resurrection that death loses and God wins at the very end. And so to be steadfast and firm. And we try to, with our faith, And I think there's other areas in our lives that we can be steadfast and firm in, like in love for our country, in our patriotism, in our thanksgiving for liberty and the freedom that we have. Because as you know, freedom is not free, is it? We're paying the price too for this mess too. Look at you've seen the gas prices? I saw $4 a gallon. All right? Every time you go to the grocery store, it's sticker shock. All right? We are paying for this. All right? But it's for 53 million people, that's how many people live in Ukraine, almost the size of the United Kingdom. Right? For 53 million people, they're paying a much, much heavier, steeper price. And so we're asked to be firm, to be steadfast, to be resolute in our faith, in our country, and in our defense of freedom. And then in our gospel, Jesus talks about, good trees producing good fruit and bad trees producing rotten fruit. And we all met people like that, right? We all see people who have produced good fruit. We've seen people that produce rotten fruit. Well, how do you tell? How do you really tell? Especially when you're deceptive, And Jesus says, he brings out that last line of the gospel. From out of the mouths comes the fullness of heart. And what's in your heart eventually comes out. All right? How many times did President Putin say, we're not going to invade, we're not going to invade, we're not going to invade? He invaded. And then when he said that these 53 million people don't have a right to exist as a country, who made him God? Right? I mean, everyone has a right to exist and to live in peace. From the mouth come the fullness of the heart. And so we find ourselves in a quite helpless situation. I don't know about you, but I feel pretty helpless. And I thought, what can I do? What can little measly me do about anything? But I figured I had to do something. So this is what I did. All right? On Friday, I came in here and I recorded the Litany of Saints. And I put it up on our website. And it's my hope that families, households will go home and click that on and pray the Litany of Saints. Pray with these good and holy men and women who have led good lives, who are a little closer to God than we are, up in heaven. That through their prayers and intercession in our prayers, hardened hearts can be softened. So I really want to encourage you to pray that Litany of Saints at home with family members, with friends, with neighbors, or just to say that we can do something. What else can you do? And you may feel helpless. I can't do anything about this. Well, I'm going to give you 3 things. 3 turns. Turn to God. Turn to one another. Turn to the bereaved. Okay? Turn to God. It's in times like these, when everything is up for grabs, that this is a time to turn to God. This is the time to say, God, come to our assistance. Lord, make haste to help us. We need your help. We need your help, Lord. This is a time to turn to God. I just heard this morning that Putin has put his nuclear forces on high alert. All right? Because he doesn't he said the sanctions that our countries have been given are unlawful. Wasn't invading the country unlawful? But anyways, this is a time to turn to God. To turn our hearts to prayer and just pray for the softening of hardened hearts. Secondly, turn to one another. We're all going through this. And some of us may be holding some in, and some of us need to express it and to get it out. Turn to someone you can trust. Turn to someone you can confide in. And talk it out. So what are we going to do? Where are we as a nation? Where are we going? Finally, the third turn. Turn towards the bereaved. Hundreds of people have already lost their lives. Hundreds. Men, women, children, everybody. Soldiers. All right? These families have paid a huge, huge price for this invasion. All right? Turn towards them. Pray for those people who have lost their loved ones. Pray for them. And so I think if we turn to God, turn to one another, turn towards the bereaved, I think it'll help. Is it going to solve everything? No, but it's going to help. It's going to help. And I just don't want you to feel like I kind of felt helpless, like I couldn't do anything. We all can do something. Let me give you a story example. We go back to August 6, 1945, Hiroshima, Japan, the day the United States dropped the atomic bomb on them. There was a little girl at the time, her name was Sadako. And little Sadako saw from the bomb, she witnessed her parents' death. She witnessed her neighbors and friends' death. She survived for a while, but she had terrible, terrible radiation burns on her arms and legs. She was immediately brought to the hospital. And this little girl, Sadako, thought, this madness has got to stop. This is crazy. And you know what she did? From her hospital bed, she asked the nurse for a plain piece of white paper. And she took that. You know that Japanese art called origami? Something I'm horrible at. But anyways, she took out of those origami techniques, she made on that little piece of paper a beautiful white crane. Now in Japan, the white crane is a symbol of peace. Okay? And so she took that, and she wrote a note at the bottom of it saying, I want you to be a disciple of peace. And she mailed it off. She did that for 683 days. Sending it anonymously, all over the world. Be a disciple for peace. One little girl. When she was ready to do the 684th, she didn't make it because she died. And so those who knew her, those from her neighborhood, had a choice. They could decide one or two things. They could decide to be filled with anger and revenge and getting even and, being a proponent of bombing the heck out of other nations. Or they could follow her example and try to be a disciple of peace. And they chose the latter. There is, till this day, over 75 years later, there's a small little group, this little community organization in Hiroshima, that once a day, they send out a crane, a white crane, saying, be a disciple of peace. My suspicion is they're sending them to Russia and to Ukraine now. I hope they are. But that's all from one little girl's idea. Right? Turn to God. Turn towards one another. Turn towards the bereaved. Pray for peace. I'm just going to close with a little song. It's a beautiful song. It's a Navajo prayer from the Navajo Native American tribe. This is called Peace Before Us. I invite you to pray this prayer as I sing it.
Behind us, peace under our feet. Peace within us, peace over us. Let all around us be behind us, love under our feet. Love within us, love over us. Let all around us be behind us, peace under our feet. Peace within us, peace over us. Let all around us be peace. Let all around us be peace.
Amen.